are talking about automation, and in particular automation that is enabled by Zapier,
Yeah.
which are you familiar with Zapier?
Yes, actually, on my day tours, because I have day tours in Istanbul and in Cappadocia as well, I do use Bokun.
Yeah.
It's a CRM,
Hmm.
and I already integrated the CRM to Zapier. So I receive,
Perfect.
how can I say, like a text, so WhatsApp text through the Zapier. So,
Awesome.
Yay. All right. So you are already you're somewhat experienced with Zapier, which is excellent. It's always good. We do recommend starting with Zapier with some like simple Zap like that, and we're going to cover an example there. But I love that. So taking a booking and sending yourself a WhatsApp message is a perfect example of a Zapier use case.
yeah,
And so we are just gonna share my screen.
so,
But just to kind of help anybody who's watching this who doesn't know what Zapier is, it is a platform automation platform. So it allows you to connect lots of different things. Like here you can see YouTube and QuickBooks and Zoom. So you can basically listen for things happening on a particular platform, and then based on that, you can then trigger things on other platforms.
yes.
So it's a way to create the connections you wish existed between platforms, but are super specific to you and are never going to be built as a general product solution by any of these companies. So instead, companies like these guys and YouLi, we publish the information so that you can then create whatever automations your business needs. So when I introduced this topic to Nick, his first question was,
Why do I need this? YouLi does everything I could possibly want it to do. It was my first reaction. And then I'm sitting back and I'm like, you know what? Accounting wise, my accountant would love to get more robust reports and stuff. So I thought, well, maybe we could connect YouLi to QuickBooks. So Jen,
mhm.
just show us what you got.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so also recognizing that if you Google for Zapier and YouLi, you'll pull up this page, which is an example of kind of all the other platforms that you can connect YouLi to. Again, this is just an example. And here you can see QuickBooks is one of those options. And you can either start from a thing happening in QuickBooks and go that way, or the
Yeah.
examples we're going to cover today is sort of start with something happening in YouLi and automatically do something over here. So that would be like a new payment triggers the creation of an invoice, right? So this is a lovely little workflow tool that Zapier publishes to kind of give you some ideas. And then when you
Mhm.
click on that button, it'll actually take you in to create a Zap, and you will need a Zapier account for that. Just a little bit of background. Also, if you go into the YouLi support system, we have a whole section on this and a whole video which deep dives. So I do recommend if you're interested to go into that if we don't cover everything you're looking for today. And we
Yeah.
also have an article on just making your first Zap, but we're going to jump in and do that right now together today. So when you're making a Zap, you always have to have a trigger. And so that's always your starting point. So something has to happen, right, to initiate this. These are generically called workflows, but they're called Zaps within Zapier.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And here you'll see that I've selected the YouLi app. And then my trigger event in this example is actually a new registration. So my example here is like a nice simple one. So I recommend you kind of get started just with a simple one where you might take a registration on YouLi and pass it through to your marketing platform. So let's say you want to add new registrations to your email newsletter in MailChimp. So you start with a new registration, and then it triggers the add update on the on your MailChimp. So you have to log into MailChimp, and then you can configure that to take the email from YouLi. And so basically Zapier gives you this really great interface to be able to pull that in and pick the thing that you want. And then it'll do this dynamically. So you're doing it as one example here, but it'll actually do this dynamically each time. So next time it'll be someone else's email. So it'll pass that one through. And this can be sometimes something that sort of non-techie people don't quite understand. You're not doing this once, you're setting it up once, but it's actually going to repeat over and over again for each of these cases. And this is just the example you're using to configure. And so you can create these variables like this, but then you can also set specific things. So always true, so not variable. In this case, like subscribed. You always want to make these people subscribed. Do you want to opt them in? Yes or no, you get to choose. Do you want to update existing or not change anyone who's already in there? So you go through all of your options there. And then you have things like tags. You can add a tag to MailChimp. Now, tags inside MailChimp can trigger automations in MailChimp, for example. So you can sort of string your automations together. So this automation will create them in MailChimp with a tag of, maybe, in this case, I've used the trip short name, but you actually might want to use the actual tags on the trip. So, you could add those trip tags in there. And then if you have an automation in MailChimp that says anybody who is booked onto a sports trip, send them this set of emails. That can trigger because you've added those tags. And of course, you want to put there any data you have, first name, last name, and maybe you have phone number for them you can put in, and then you could continue, and you can actually retest these steps and confirm. And then once you test it and it successfully goes through, you can click to publish it, and then it goes live, and then any new registration on YouLi will automatically get added to MailChimp. Now I've got a little filter in here. This is an advanced kind of thing, like a mini advanced thing. You can set it up so that you only want to trigger this, you only want to move forward if the email is not blank. There are cases where you can get people into the system that don't have emails, so you don't want to waste your time attempting to add it to MailChimp if they don't have an email. So these are little extra things you can put into the Zaps to clean them up. All right, because there's the basic concept. So you always start with the basics. I want to take a person registered, and I want to add them to MailChimp. But then maybe you get an error one time and it says this failed because Isaac doesn't have an email address. Like, oh, okay. Then you can add this filter to skip them when they don't have email addresses. So the great thing about these automations is they're super flexible, but it also does mean that you have to kind of know what you're looking to do. Any questions on what I've shown so far?
No, it's all clear. Thanks. Great.
Amazing. So I also want to emphasize that I'm showing you how to use a tool. This is a technology tool that YouLi partners with to make these things easier for you. And I've given you an example of adding somebody who's registered for a trip on YouLi to your email marketing newsletter in MailChimp. Maybe that's not a problem you have. If this is not a problem you have, then don't go and build this Zap, right? You always want to start with the problem that you actually have, not necessarily just implementing something just because it can be done, right? And so to that point, we're going to pick up Nick's problem, which is how to make your bookkeeper's life easier, or if you are your bookkeeper, how to make your life easier. And in that case, you're going to want to start with a payment trigger. So not a registration, but an actual payment that's come in. And I do want to call out, we have the ability to trigger based on single trips. Like if you're having like a really special event where you want to do something special because, let's say it's a really big one and it's got some custom handling that you need to do for it, you might just change that to be a single trip, and then you would pick the trip that should trigger it, right? But usually our clients are going to want the any owned trip, which sounds a little bit weird, but it's just making it really clear that you have to own the trip for this to work. So if you are partnering with someone else and they own the trip, then this won't trigger for you because you don't have permission for that. So that's why it says on any owned trip. So obviously it's not all the trips on YouLi, it's just the trips that you own.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then you'll click into test and you'll find some new records and you'll pick up an example of a payment that's come through, and you'll continue with that selected record. So this is all sort of like standard Zapier stuff. And in this case, I've added a filter condition. And generally, I would say any advanced Zap is going to have some filter conditions in it. So you always want to think to yourself, what do I want to filter for? And in this case, I've done payment status successful, because I
Yeah.
only want to create invoices inside my accounting platform if the payment was successful. If it failed, or if it's been refunded, I don't want to handle it with this Zap. So recognizing that this trigger will actually pass a lot of data through, and you want to make sure you're filtering for the cases that you want to capture. So payment status contains successful is usually an important one. And then I'm going to skip over this one for a minute because it's a little bit advanced and you can kind of take these things in and out. So I'm just going to jump into the creation of the sales invoice. And so here I've connected to my accounting app. Now I have a demo account in Xero that makes that really easy. You could connect this to QuickBooks if you have an account with them, and it'll be very similar. But each of these apps has slightly different names. So for Xero, it's create sales invoice. I think in QuickBooks, it's a slightly different term. So you just need to kind of explore what they give you and pick the right one. And you might actually not want to make an invoice. You might want to create a payment. So that's something you do want to kind of think about with your automations. And so again, recognizing, start with the problem that you have. If your problem is that you have money coming into your bank and you have no invoice to reconcile it with, then you need to make an invoice to handle that reconciliation. If your problem is that you have invoices sitting in your accounting system and you need to record a payment against it, then you need to create a payment. So it's just about knowing what your challenge is and then using the correct action based on the problem that you're trying to solve. So here I'm going in, I had to pick my organization, which is inside my Xero account, and then contact name. Now, just going to put out a little warning for those of you who are tackling accounting automation. Contact name inside these accounting platforms can get a little bit tricky. And it is used as a unique identifier. So names are actually not a great unique identifier. And so usually we end up having, like in this example, I've just put the full name in. But for a real production Zap, we typically need to add something in there, like their email address, into the contact name to make it unique.
Yeah.
So this is a bit of a weird thing about automations with accounting platforms, that the contact name is actually misnamed. It should be contact identifier is really what that is. And so we actually have an example here where the contact name is actually based on the trip itself. So we associate all the payments with a trip inside the accounting platform instead of the actual traveler, because the way they want to do their books is actually based on trips, and the individual travelers, yeah, sure, that's in that the information's in the invoice, but it's not, they don't want to track revenue based on individual travelers. They want to do it based on trips. So that's a very important thing to think about when you're thinking about this automation. What do you want to see in your accounting platform? Do you want to see your data based on individuals? Or do you want to see it organized around trips, or maybe organized around something else? So it's important to think about how you want that data to appear, not just putting the name of the person who made the payment in there, because that's not always what you need in your accounting platform. Because remember, YouLi is where you see, did Rosa pay for her trip, right? Like that's where you see that information. But your accounting platform is serving a different purpose. Your accounting platform is there to make sure that you're tracking your profitability, that you're paying your suppliers, that your tax accounting is proper. So you may need to set up your data differently in your accounting platform than it's organized in YouLi, because they are achieving different goals. And we are not bookkeepers, we are not accountants, so we can't tell you exactly what that should be. We can just tell you what we can help you automate. And if you come to us and say, my bookkeeper would like us to track this based on trip type, for example, And so then we would recommend how you would use this to configure the automation based on what your accountant has recommended you should do for organization.
Yeah.
So you'll notice there's a lot of fields in here, and this can be a little bit overwhelming, but usually this is stuff you can kind of skip over, like if it's not required. So you'll see that's a required field, so you have to pick it. But you'll see most of these are not required, and if that's not information you need to track in your accounting system, then you can just skip over a bunch of that stuff. But then you get to status. And here, for example, typically you'd want to submit it as approved, but again, your process might be that you want your bookkeeper to look at it and review it before it's approved. Generally with these automations, you skip straight to the approval state. Then you can do a dynamic date based on the payment. And then you can set a due date. We typically recommend today +2 because that gives your bookkeeper time before it shows as unpaid, right? But you could make that +5 or +30 just to give your team time before they have to click the reconcile button. Because remember, these invoices are not for Rosa, right? So yeah, sure, Rosa made a payment in YouLi. That's based on the invoice that's sitting in YouLi. So this can be a bit unintuitive. You're like, wait, YouLi does invoices for me. Why do I need to make an invoice in Xero or QuickBooks? Well, because you need it for your accountant to be able to reconcile. So
That's
Rosa
right,
should never see this invoice. This invoice is just for your bookkeeper, your accountant, yourself within that system. So that's why the due date is actually sort of it's a fake date, right? It's a date that allows you to keep on top of your reconciliation within the system. And then you enter your currency. Again, this can be dynamic or it can be hard coded. If your accounting platform only allows one currency, then you better hard code it. But if you are configured for multiple, you can actually select custom, and then you can base it on the currency coming from the payment in YouLi. So again, you need to decide between that. Now, if you do multiple currencies, there might be some extra steps. So you might add an extra step to do a currency conversion, for example, if you're taking payments in multiple currencies. And then the number. Now, this is called number inside of Xero. I find this a little bit unfortunate, like naming wise. It should say invoice number. This is a very important number in any accounting platform. You can only ever make one of these. So when you're testing, be very careful, because once you make one, you can't make it again. And we actually recommend using the payment gateway charge ID. So if you're using Stripe for your payments, if you use the payment gateway charge ID as the invoice number, then it will do this magical thing when you come into your Xero reconciliation. This other examples, but it'll sort of have the Stripe payment on that side and it'll have the invoice on this side, and they'll be green and they'll be auto matched. So you just click OK. So we strongly recommend using the payment gateway charge ID here. You might use an additional identifier there in case you have no fee payment methods that don't have payment IDs, payment gateway IDs. And that's why I've got 2 numbers here. So that's the number of the invoice, and that's really important strategically to make this automation work, because if these numbers don't match what you're getting from your Stripe data feeds, your bank data feeds, there's still going to be a little more extra manual stuff in your accounting platform. So that's an important one to get right. We also recommend you put the YouLi reference code into the reference field. This just allows you, in case you ever need to search that number in your accounting platform, to sync those up, because of course you can have more than one payment from Rosa on the same reference code. So that's generated per traveler per trip. And then this is important. Set this to false, sent to contact. Don't email these to the contact. So you want to make sure that, assuming you don't want to do that, you choose that. Then you get into your line items. Now I'm going to just jump in and show you what this looks like at the end, so you understand what a line item is. This is a line item, right? Like the amounts that are shown. And so like this is for the trip booking and the price. And so that comes in here. So this is the description, the quantity, the unit price. Now, I put a mistake in here on purpose to show you, like, I've doubled up my descriptions. It's YouLi fee, twice. Oops. So I just wanted to show you how easy it is, first of all, to make that mistake. If you come in here and you're doing your output descriptions and you pick it, maybe you pick it twice on accident.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you double click. That's okay.
Yeah.
You run a test, you see that it's a mistake, you just delete the extra, and now you just have the one. So it's really easy to do that. And what's interesting here that I'm not going to go into depth on is that this is actually 3 things in one field. So just so you know that you can have, see how there's 3 rows here? Well, there's just one field here, and that's enabled by the formatter by Zapier. So this allows you to basically take all the data that you have across multiple things and turn it into what's called a line item.
Yeah.
So this is a really powerful feature within Zapier that allows you to create multiple rows inside your invoice so that you can track your YouLi fees or your surcharges and your actual fees separately as line items. Not everybody needs to do this. In fact, most of our clients do not do the multiple. Usually they just have the one row for just like, we charge them $600 and that's it. But it's important to be aware that if you do need to split out and track like the fee that I paid to YouLi, the surcharge that I added on for the credit card booking, and you actually want to track them against different accounts because they're actually, other revenue kind of thing instead of sales, like the credit card surcharge. So that's why you would want to split out your line items. If you don't need them in separate accounts, just keep them as one line item. Nick, have I lost you yet?
No, I'm following along. I think we could have gone into the shallow end of the pool first before we dove completely into the deep end, but I get it, and my accountant is going to appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think this is the challenge with automating connections to your accounting platform. It is not the shallow end of the pool. This is the shallow end of the pool if you want to take a registration and add it to your marketing list.
Yep.
Really straightforward, not a lot of dramas, not a lot of thought, right? Whereas, yeah.
I was going to say, I do love the fact that it is so powerful. And as soon as I can start wrapping my brain around, the things that need to be automated, that would be great. So how do you decide what needs to be automated?
I think it's the kind of thing where the quantity of so if inside your accounting platform, you've got like lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff here, and you're like, what, but it should just know to match that. And instead of having to think about every single one of these, you can actually spend, let's say, half a day thinking about this automation. You set it up, and then every week your bookkeeper can just go in and everything is green, right? Because the automation has made it so that they can just, yep, confirmed, yep, confirmed, yep, confirmed. And that means your books close faster. It means you can recognize revenue at the right times. It means you can handle your tax reporting more effectively. So either just being more compliant, or in cases like in Australia, if you actually handle your, not just your sales side, but the cost of Stripe, as well as the cost of YouLi, if you want to put that in as a bill in there, if you're in Australia, there's a tax that we have to charge that you can claim back from the government. So if you put this data in as a bill, so like those are what, like it's like 5 cents or 26 cents or whatever. And so if you're doing it by hand, you're not bothering to ask for that money back from the government. But if you add them all up, then suddenly you're getting back maybe $500 a month worth of taxes that you were just not bothering to request back. So that's specific to the Australian tax system, but every country and every business will have their own little sort of, like, if you just managed your books a little bit more tightly, you could save more money, you could apply for different things from the government, you could do things faster that could bring some money back in, or even just give you that peace of mind that you're compliant with whatever wacky rules your government has imposed on you. Right. So this is a good example of being able to put your Stripe fees in, and that's data that we pass through. Now, in this particular case, there's no fee. So some of our plans have no fees and some of our plans have a 1% fee. But the gateway always charges a fee, right? So Stripe will always charge you a fee. And if you want to make sure that's being tracked as a bank fee, then you can make that as a bill and you can account for that when you're doing your reconciliation, and you can say, yep, that's money that I paid to Stripe. And it has, in this case, it says GST on expenses. You can put the right tax rate on it so you can account for that properly. Have I taken us deeper into the pool, or have I made things a little bit clearer?
No, I love that you keep expanding my universe. I think this is fantastic. So you've shown us how when data comes into YouLi, it can go out to all of these other fantastic platforms. Do you have any examples where there might be data that goes into one of my other platforms and it comes into YouLi?
Right question. So, for example, and I think Tolga, you mentioned, having a CRM that might sort of initiate something. So here's an example. If you used HubSpot as your CRM, if you had a deal where you were working with somebody, and then when that deal closes, you want to actually add them to YouLi, you could create that automation. So when something happens in your CRM, filter based on whatever rules, you're looking for a close, or you're looking for a certain price point, or you're looking for a certain trip name or something, and then you can add it here. And so you could actually make this dynamic as well. So you could make this based on the name. So if the name in HubSpot of the deal matches the name of the trip, you can automatically add them to a trip in YouLi when that closes in your CRM, or when it changes status in the CRM. Do you think you would ever use something like that?
Yeah.
And of course, once it gets added to YouLi, that'll then trigger any automations you've set up in YouLi. So if there's no payment here, you're just adding them as a registration, so that an invoice will be generated on the YouLi side, and they will then start qualifying for our automated email saying, pay your deposit on that invoice. So it can be really powerful in both directions. And I think today we were really focused on the ability to sort of take your payment data from YouLi and add that into your accounting platform. I also just wanted to touch on the fact that we are adding some additional data. So this isn't live yet, but it's coming. So this is invoice line items, which are these in YouLi. So if you're inside YouLi and you're looking at the trip board for, let's say, Rachel is going on a trip to Istanbul, and she's added an extra night on for $234. We are now going to pass that data through with the payments data. So you can actually account for that separately if you needed to. Maybe the main trip cost you put onto one account, but extra nights or something else actually gets accounted in different ways. We're now going to pass that data as well. And if she's added on a kite surfing lesson for $150, that'll also come through separately now. So previously we did like the total that they owed, and now we're going to give you that data. So Nick, to your point about expanding further, so we talked about fees and all of that stuff, but now we're talking about the invoice line items. So being able to actually split out the extra things that you put on those invoices, because you may also want to account for those separately again.
Yeah.
And we are going to be even publishing events that specifically say when she asks for the kite surfing lesson, when she adds that to her invoice, it'll trigger a Zap that will allow you to then, let's say, contact the kite surfing company and say, oh, we've got another one who's added on. for example. So it doesn't have to be just to your accounting platform. It can be that because Rachel has chosen the kite surfing lesson, that triggers another flow. Could WhatsApp you and say,
Yeah.
you know, Rachel is now doing the kite surfing lesson. Make sure that there's room on the boat.
Yeah.
So, does that answer your question, Nick?
That more than answers my question. Tolga, I know that you said that you're new with not new, but you're doing trips and you haven't really explored YouLi that much yet. I want to give you a little background on who we are. One of the reasons that Jen is so eloquently able to talk about everything here is because she is the founder of YouLi and she understands all of the background stuff and all of the technical stuff. And I have been a customer of YouLi for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So I've been running my own retreats and stuff, and it's been great. And so I know YouLi from the customer side. And just recently, within the last several months, they've brought me on to help do demos and onboarding and stuff like that. So when Jen really gets into the weeds and all the technical stuff, my mind starts expanding with all of the possibilities that I've never considered before. So I'm hoping that you're able to keep up with her brilliant mind, because
Yeah.
I'm a simple person.
Oh, it's a good system. Definitely, it's a really good system, and like integrating with the Zapier and other things, really good actually. And then, if it's possible to use like for email marketing as well.
We do sort of market for the trip itself. So if people express interest on the trip, then you can send messages within that trip. But everything is oriented around trips within YouLi. So we don't do generic email marketing. So you wouldn't be like, you know, sending out a list, you know, a blast to a list to say, come back to Turkey this year. It would be more like messaging to say, you expressed interest in our August Cappadocia tour. You know, click here to lock in the booking because there's only 3 spots left. So it would be more sort of end of funnel marketing rather than sort of top of funnel marketing. And so that's why our example is to connect with MailChimp, so that, you know, as people book onto your trips, you should absolutely be adding them to your CRM, which could be like, you know, a full CRM like HubSpot. It could be a sort of a mini CRM like MailChimp. And that way you can do the general marketing automation that you need to do for your company and drive them back around into making more bookings on the YouLi platform.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's a great question, though. And Nick, I think you had asked me a question when we were prepping for this around similar to that in terms of the bulk versus real time.
Right. Yeah, because I'm trying to remember exactly what the example was. Oh, I was talking about reporting, because I was wondering if we could create a Zap that would take all of my customers within a particular trip. Like I'm going to Morocco and I want to export all of that data and then connect it to GPT to do a bunch of reporting. And I was concerned that because all the customers are already there, it wouldn't really be, you know, dynamic if I had somebody all of a sudden at the last minute join. It wouldn't run that correctly.
Well, so the great thing about Zapier is that it's real time. So Zaps trigger as soon as, like, when someone makes a payment, like, you know, within seconds, minutes, that data is passed through Zapier and goes off to do the next thing, right? Which is amazing that it's that fast, right? But sometimes we sort of work in batch, which is what you're talking about, where you're sort of like, well, actually, I want to sort of like work with everybody that has booked onto this trip. And so in order to power a sort of a batch job, you would actually need to set your Zap up before you launch the trip, so that as people are booking in, you're adding them into a sheet somewhere that ChatGPT is then reading from. So whenever you're ready to do that reporting, you've got that sitting there because you've collected it over time. So there's a little bit of an extra step there if you want to do sort of batching. where Zapier is really much more oriented towards the sort of real-time small transaction rather than large data sets. So I think it's a really good clarification of the kinds of automations that Zapier is really good for, versus where you might need to think in advance to kind of create that batch data that you need for end of trip reporting.
Right. Up until now, I've been using Zapier for my business for a newsletter because I've got folks who are contributing articles and photographs and content, and they upload it to a Google Doc or a Google form, or I'm sorry, Wufoo. They import it into Wufoo, and then from Wufoo, I have Zapier then take it into Trello where I can, manipulate the data there. So that's the way I've been using it up until now. And up until basically this morning, I didn't understand how I would possibly use YouLi and Zapier together, because I think that YouLi's a really great tool and does pretty much everything that I need it to do. But now I'm seeing I can actually expand my business and make it even a little bit better and easier. There's pieces that I've been doing manually that would certainly benefit from being zapped.
Love that. Also love the fact that you got a lot of value already from just what YouLi does sort of out of the box. And I think that is actually an important thing is Zapier is an add-on, right? And so you can add it at any stage. So if you have a clear vision of where you want to go, the sooner you implement it, the sooner you can have a lot of the gains. And so we do have clients who launch with Zapier integrations, but we also have many clients who run for a year, then they figure out what they need, then they implement Zapier after that. So it just depends on where you are in your sort of automation sophistication journey. If you're ready to go, do it on launch, but it also is fine if you implement it further along. And it's about asking the question of what is the right tool. Like, do you need Zapier in the mix? We've kind of shown you some examples where it's a good solution. It's not the solution for all of your problems. And it can be expensive if you get into larger data sets. So actually, that's another point about the batch data aspect. If you are dealing with a large number of travelers, Zapier may stop being an efficient way or sort of a cost-effective way to do this, because it can get quite expensive at the sort of higher volumes, and you might want to seek alternative ways to do automation there. So please do be in touch with us if you're kind of hitting that wall with Zapier and you need a sort of more sophisticated automation layer. But for most of our clients, Zapier is just an amazing way to just get something solved really quickly, and without a lot of like dev maintenance, which those bigger projects can take on. So I think the cost trade-off there is really great at that sort of like entry level with Zapier. So that's why we do recommend it. And so Nick, you run what, 20 retreats a year?
Oh, 15 to 20. Yep.
15 to 20. And so it suits you really well at that scale. So yeah, and then you just sort of explore whether or not another automation will suit your purposes. Like I said, MailChimp has its own level of automations. Like if you use that tool, be sure and explore how you can chain these together, right? So it can be quite fun if you like solving problems. If for those of you who are watching and you feel like you got way too deep in the pool and you need a little bit of a life jacket, you can absolutely book in a call, and Myron's on the call here. He would jump on with you and actually go through line by line with you in the Zap and help you understand what you need to do to configure that. So we do offer that consulting if you're not finding it intuitive. Although Nick, I know you're just gonna like jump in there and like just start breaking things, and
That's MO, get in there and break stuff.
And Tonga, it sounds like you've already got some experience, so I feel like you wouldn't have any issues making some automations right out of the box.
Yeah, I like to use automation definitely. So it makes more easier. So it's goes like everything's like more easier. So I want to expand more actually. So not only Zapier and adding like other tools maybe. So maybe integrating with like a HubSpot or like a WhatsApp. So other things as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. And if you have, so you work mostly on WhatsApp, I'm guessing. We have teams who work inside Slack or Microsoft Teams, and so they get
Yeah.
automation sent through to those channels. It's a great way to be notified of certain things. And that's where it's like, you can use the filter to say, when somebody books the this
Yeah.
particular package, I want a WhatsApp message, Yeah.
Yeah, that's good actually. It's a good system, definitely.
Any other questions we can answer today?
I'm fine. So all good, all clear. And I want to be on the board actually. So maybe so I can open like a demo like using as well. So
Totally. Yeah.
and
Yeah, you can sign up to YouLi for free. The Zapier integration is on one of our higher plans. I'm actually off the top of my head, I should know this. I think it's either Pro or Plus that you need to be on to
Yeah.
activate the Zapier integration.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you're welcome, obviously, to jump onto a full demo. You might end up on the call with Nick.
Right.
Perfect.
Be happy to walk you through it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
joining today. And we
No
look forward to seeing you launch some trips on YouLi.
I hope. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see you. So later, maybe like we can see each other again. So thank you so
Sounds
much.
good. Thank you, Tolga.
Yeah, when we get to
Thank you
Turkey.
so much. Thank you. Have a
Yeah,
nice day.
right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Ted.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, Myron.
Bye.
See ya.